Hello and good morning and welcome to our annual SRI Services and Partners Good Money Week event. I'm Julia Dreblow, the founder of SRI Services and also the Fund Eco Market Fund Database tool, and I'm basically recording this session the day before the conference because I have no idea how my voice is going to hold up chairing 5 sessions during the day. So this is a pre-record. It's going to run for about 20 minutes. I'm going to give you my views on the market as it is at the moment and the main issues that are facing us and some of the changes and updates with SRI Services and our various tools that we offer. So let's start with a quick run through of what we're going to be doing today. So after my session, you'll be hearing from James Alexander, the new CEO of UCSIF, the industry not-for-profit body for sustainable finance. You'll then be hearing from Mark Manning of the FCA, who's the technical specialist there I've been dealing with for the last couple of years. There will then be 5 panel sessions from fund managers. The first one will focus all on people issues, diversity, inclusion and equality. Then we'll move on to biodiversity and supply chain management. Then there'll be 2 sessions on climate change after lunch. One will be about climate change, the facts, so the various reports that have been out recently, all the information that's coming up in the run up to COP26. So that'll be a very fact-based session. And then the session after that will be about responding to the climate emergency. What does good look like? So investor responses to climate change issues. The final issues will then be, the final session rather, will then be about developments in the industry and initiatives that are going to hopefully take this area forward and help us to deal with threats. And one of the people speaking on that panel will be somebody called Mike Clark, who is an actuary who specialises in climate change issues. He's one of the best informed and most knowledgeable people I've ever come across in this area. And he will be talking to you about what actually needs to happen. So big picture stuff, what needs to happen, and then helping you to understand it when it does, because the way he looks at risk and the way, of course, intermediaries have got to look at risk, they're pretty much overlapping. What else to mention? So during the lunch break, we'll be doing a session on biodiversity as well. We'll be showing a film which is James Alexander introducing, having a conversation with Professor Das Gupta, who wrote the government report on biodiversity loss. So that's a really great interview that I wanted to give you the opportunity to see if you've not seen it already. And as we close at 5 o'clock, we will be talking, or basically opening up a chat room for us to all talk to one another. So the formal close will be at 5 o'clock. However, there will be a chat function available, chat room available there, so that we can just have one-to-one conversations, hopefully quiz the fund managers that will be able to stay on the line. That will be totally informal though. We'll put the link for that in the chat so that you're able to do that right at the very end of this session. So I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of what we do in case you don't know SRI Services already. And I know that a lot of people had signed up for today whose names I didn't recognise, which is really, really exciting. So thank you for joining us. And let's start by saying I've worked in retail, sustainable, responsible and ethical investment now for over 25 years. I started off life as a broker consultant, working at a company called MPI, and then moved to Friends Provident, and have run my own business since 2010, 2011. Which the main part of which is a Fund Eco Market Database tool, which helps financial advisors and other financial service intermediaries to match fund strategies to client aims. It's designed to complement the other tools that you use, and it's free to use thanks to support from fund managers whose logos are shown here, who are also the people talking today. In addition to the free to use database, which everybody can access, we also do consultancy support, provide data and also run events, as you'll be aware, like today, and work with lots of different companies over the years. So we also won an Investment Week award for Best ESG or Sustainability Support Provider. So that was very exciting last week. And in addition to these things, and I guess bring it all together, what I mostly try and do is just bang the drum for the area and just help people to understand it so that you can make better use of fund options that are available and recognise the benefits they can bring. I do this because I think it really matters where we invest. I think we've got very little chance of basically stopping climate change from getting a whole lot worse, or indeed biodiversity loss, and also addressing social inequalities, etc. if investors are not involved. They absolutely must be involved. So I've always believed in this area. I think clients are very interested also, and of course I think the financial case is just beyond question. Companies that are damaging the planet cannot carry on doing so forever. We're seeing obviously a shift towards and favouring those companies with strong strategies looking after environmental and social issues well. So that is beyond doubt in my view. I also work with various other groups, so amongst them I'm a director of UCSIF at the moment, have been previously also, and work with people like the BSI and TISA and others. So wide range of activity, mostly focused on just helping intermediaries to understand this market. But the main thing that we do really is the Fund Eco Market database, which I hope, if you haven't explored it already, I hope you will do in due course. So if you're not familiar with the site, this slide just gives you an idea of what the Fund Eco Market homepage looks like. But I would say it's undergoing a complete rebuild at the moment. The database has basically outgrown itself, if you like. So it needs completely restructuring and expanding in terms of what it can do. We're moving the Fund Eco Market and dial shifter information onto the SRI Services site, but these are conversations for another time. But suffice to say, the same information will be on it, but it will look different in future. The app, however, for the time being will stay the same, and I know Fund Eco Market app is really, really popular for those people who use it. So please download that if you haven't already. So how's it all going? Well, there's a press release put out last week by the Iris Foundation, which estimated total retail assets under management in the UK of 61 billion, which is almost double the 33 billion it was last year. So that is phenomenal growth by anyone's standards. It won't tally necessarily with the figures you see elsewhere. The way people count these things very often varies, but I would put a lot of faith in these numbers. Peter also talked in his press release about this, about last year having matched the growth that we saw over the previous 35 years, which is really important. And it does, as Peter says, raise issues around whether or not the sector is ready for this. A lot of people are very, very new to the area. They don't understand the importance of what they've got into. And I really very much hope that today is going to be part of the education process and helping people to grasp how the real world and the investment world come together. So to break this area down into bite-sized pieces for those who are newer to the area, and also to help you to communicate this to clients, I would suggest you consider that there are 4 main groups of issues or things that people may be concerned about, be they investors or individual clients. Environmental, social, governance, and ethical. These are all absolutely interconnected, of course. Habitat destruction can very often be a human rights or a labour standard issue. Climate change affects not just the planet and the species that live on it, and deforestation, etc., but it will affect people. So these things are interconnected, and governance is about the management of the issues. And ethical issues, of course, very, very often are social issues also, but this just gives you a structure to help discuss what these funds look to consider over and above what a conventional or other old style, if you like, fund would do. And then there's hundreds of different words and descriptions that people use and different methodologies, but at the end of the day, there's only really 3 different ways that a fund manager can deal with an issue. They can avoid areas that they don't think are appropriate, or they exclude them, they don't fit in the index, whatever. Or they can support, hold, invest in, or have themes that focus on those things they do want to invest in. Or they can use their power as shareholders or bondholders to get access to senior management to encourage change. So that's the influence, engagement, stewardship piece. So 3 strategies: avoid, support, influence. And in terms of what this area is for, it's really important that we remember to focus on the real world aims of these funds. They vary. Some are more focused on this than others, of course they are. But essentially there's 2 main real world aspects that are important to this area. One is to upscale sustainable businesses, which is effectively the green finance piece. So we know we need to pump trillions into new companies to develop new technologies and to expand them at scale so that we can move across, for example, to clean energy, to electric vehicles, to better food supply, loads of changes that need making there. But we also need to transition existing companies. So there's really very little benefit in pumping a lot of money into lovely clean green companies if the incumbent businesses carry on doing what they've always done. That will undermine any progress that's made on green finance. So we need to encourage existing businesses to transition to cleaner, greener, more socially aware, more just, more appropriate strategies that will make them more sustainable in the long term. And of course, one very conventional aim, which is financial performance. These funds clearly don't and never have been able to survive because they sound nice. They've got to generate competitive performance that meet the expectations of investors, clients. So rest assured, when you're listening to the fund managers today, they absolutely have an eye on how well their fund is doing, and they know fully well that they do not have the right to attract investment unless they have decent performance. And guess what, guys? These funds have done collectively very well. Obviously, there's good and bad phases for individual areas of the market, for individual fund managers, whatever. But generally, the performance of these funds is and always has been absolutely solid. So then counting down, we've got 4 different types of issues. We've got the 3 different approaches. We've got the 2 real-world aims and the 1 requirement to deliver financial performance. We crunch all these issues together into what we call SRI styles. They don't really focus on the performance side too much, but that's inherent within all these funds. The 3 on the left are funds that are focused on solutions and transition leaders and companies that are already generally pretty good at helping to facilitate and drive change, so they can be sustainability themed, environmental or social. The middle ones then are the values-led funds, funds where the larger focus is ethical issues, although very often they're very heavily focused on sustainability also. On the right-hand side then we have funds that are a little bit more contentious, sustainability tilted funds, those that overweight good companies, underweight companies with poor performance, and funds on the ESG plus side where there's a risk mitigation aspect, looking at ESG risks very seriously, plus building in exclusions. Now these funds tend to focus more heavily on the stewardship side because they're investing in controversial companies and are therefore more focused on trying to affect change. Now of course these are generalizations, but this is our starting point that we've created to help intermediaries. The limited exclusion funds are funds that do market themselves as for being clients in this area, but they're not as deep dive into these issues as most of the other funds that we hold on the site. So I'm only going to show this slide briefly, but I want to draw to your attention the fact that there's lots of funds in the various different categories, apart from faith-based, which is tiny, but so many funds in this market do market themselves as being sustainability because they understand the importance of sustainability issues. But by splitting that group into 2, what you can see is those that are more themed or deep dive and use sustainability issues as their complete driver of stock selection versus those that are more of a tilt, sort of overweight, underweight position. And that of course helps guard intermediaries against their clients thinking that particular funds are greenwashing them and misleading them. A lot of these funds do say that's what they do, but people very often don't read the literature. So that's why we separate these things out. So again, a slide that I'm only going to touch on very, very briefly, but suffice to say we regularly publish what people are clicking on our site. We like to walk the talk on openness and transparency. This helps intermediaries have conversations with clients. It helps you to understand what it is your clients are most likely to be interested in at any point in time. So do keep an eye on our blogs where we publish information about what people are searching for on the Fund Eco Market database. Now I'd like to give you a few thoughts on what I think is happening in this market, where the opportunities and threats are more than anything. So first off, of course, strength-wise, the penny has finally dropped. People have recognised the relevance of the planet to investment and also people, and they understand business issues a lot better than they ever did before. The narrative, therefore, has largely shifted, so people have stopped making daft criticisms of the area that were never founded in fact anyway. So a lot of that narrative has gone. There's a rapid increase in assets under management. There are new funds being launched and there are existing funds converting to ESG, which is most welcome because in order to shift assets rapidly, we're going to have to make changes to existing investment strategies. We're also seeing a lot of innovation, so lots of new ideas, welcome thoughts. This is all good stuff. Some will work, some won't work, that's absolutely fine. It was ever thus. And then, of course, there's the growing role of government and regulators. We are starting to get structures in place that help new entrants to navigate what's what and to make sense and to help move the area forwards. On the opportunity side, we know that clients are enthusiastic. A lot of people are really keen on this area. Once they hear about it from their intermediary or whoever, they like the sound of it. We know that we actually can help deliver positive change. That's a really important message. Big change cannot happen without investors. So we can help. We have a really important role to play. We've also started to stop beating ourselves up about this area being complicated. We know it's complicated. The issues we face are complicated. So we don't need to tie ourselves up in knots over that. We've just got to be open and honest and transparent about what we do, and we can move forward from there. And people are increasingly understanding that. We also know that data and information from companies, and therefore financial evidence from fund managers, is improving. We are quite easily able to say now, look, you can see it makes sense financially to focus on this area. And with the emergence of international systems and rules changing and bringing clarity, we know that we'll be able to open up far bigger opportunities as people learn to trust the system more. On the weaknesses side then, there's still quite a few there too. I really think probably the biggest issue we face is the low awareness of the seriousness of the challenges that we face. People don't understand what real sustainability means. You're living within our means, within what the planet can cope with, planetary boundaries, if you like. People don't understand the complexity of the journey. People understand that they can launch a fund that does this or that, but they don't understand that this is part of a big transition that has got to take place. And we're all at different places on the journey, and we've got to help those people who are new to it to move forwards. I think there's too much optimism and overzealous marketing. Greenwash remains an issue. Some of it is intentional, some of it is not intentional, but generally I think the issue is here that there's a real lack of modesty and realism about what individual funds do and what collectively we can do. And we need to be a bit more realistic about the fact that we have a part to play and we are an essential linchpin, but we are not the entire solution. We need regulation, consumers, everybody to come on board and start changing what they do if we are to transition to more sustainable lifestyles. And then finally on this bit, so low quality communications and strategies, particularly if you're a fund manager, take a look at the KID documents, the prospectuses and other materials that your company puts out, and ask yourself whether or not, if you were sat in front of a client, whether or not you could answer the client's questions and truly explain what it is that you do as a day job. I think this area is phenomenally difficult. It's why we do what we do with Fund Eco Market, but I think that we've still got a very long way to go sorting out communications issues. So on the bigger external threat side of things, the mixed quality of data remains an issue, because if companies can't produce proper data yet, which a lot of them genuinely can't, there's no point data providers pretending their data is amazing. We know there's still holes in the system. We know that there's evidence that basically we are failing all around us. Just look at the news. Floods, fires, storms, etc. We know we don't have this stuff sussed. I think also that the impact market, the message they put out, often underplays the systemic threats that exist and the fact that everything needs to change. I think commentators are very often poorly placed to critique strategies and issues as they come their way. And then the biggest threat of all, I firmly believe we can re-engineer the financial services system and investment system. I really do believe that. I wouldn't bother doing what I do if I didn't. But the question is, will we? Will we really engineer the financial system in time to address these massive threats like climate change and biodiversity loss? That remains a question that is hanging in the air, if you like. So I'd say what I want you to take away from that, probably as much as anything, is a recognition that we're all on a journey, but if the way we lead our lives and the world that investors shape is not sustainable, then it is genuinely and inherently unsustainable, which means it cannot go on forever. So if you can grasp that and understand the enormity of the issues that we face, it opens up a world of opportunities for investors and others, recognizing what is going to happen. And I hope you'll learn a lot more about that during the session today. And so for my most serious slide of the day, where do I think this is all going? So sustainable investment, and ultimately, I believe all investment, I think will land up effectively being a bit like a sandwich, whereby underneath and underpinning everything will be an understanding of ESG issues, risks in particular. So ESG, risk mitigation, integrating ESG analysis into everything that investors look at. And on the top slice, we have responsible ownership. We've already got an increasingly chunky stewardship code in the UK, and that's increasingly the case worldwide, where investors are being pushed to engage with the companies that they own, that they are ultimately responsible for, to encourage them to take environmental, social and governance, and indeed sustainability issues more seriously. So that's your top slice and your bottom slice. What sits between those is going to very much vary from fund manager to fund manager. Now, for funds intended for the market that I talk about, we're talking about a focus on social, environmental or ethical issues or sustainability issues, but that could be a lot wider for the rest of the market. So I suggest you bear this in mind. We are going to see ESG risk mitigation and responsible ownership across all assets. That is no longer going to be a key differentiator. Exactly how it's done, of course, will bring points of differentiation, but this is where I believe the market is heading. So a final slide before we go live. Event logistics, how's this all going to work? So there's a chat function, as you'll know, on Zoom. Please do use it. It'll help to keep us relevant to the information that you're wanting to know about. It'll help us to feel more engaged with you as an audience. So please do. And then also polls throughout the day, we'll be asking questions. Really want to know where you're going from. That will help us to steer the conversations whilst we're talking and help us to give feedback also to the fund managers who are kindly presenting. Breakout room at 5 o'clock. It'll just be a chat. We'll put a link in the chat, and really hope that as many people as possible will be able to stay and just have a conversation and just talk at the end of the day. I think that'll be hugely useful. And then also finally to say, 6 hours of CPD. Zoom does track how long you're on the session for, so please, we will give certificates for the number of hours that you've been on the session. So really hope you find this useful. So CISI, CPD accredited for up to 6 hours, hoping that you can stay with us for as long as you can. So all that remains before I pass back slightly bizarrely to myself is to say thank you so much for coming along and joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know everyone's up to their eyes at the moment, so I really appreciate you doing this. And thank you also to all these fund managers. It's quite hard organising this number of fund managers for the session, but their enthusiasm has made it all worthwhile. So many people so keen to talk about what they're doing in this area and to share their thoughts with you. So massive thank you to all the fund managers that are involved. I really hope you'll enjoy the day. And with that, I will end this recording. Thank you. Bye-bye. And with a little luck, you'll be able to see and hear me very shortly. If you could make that happen, Sally and Joey, that would be fantastic. I will. Are you okay, Joey? We
can hear you, Julia. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so can you click onto my camera so that we are viewing my screen? I think there's about 3 versions of me on here, so it looks like you might have the wrong version of me. Listen, I'm just going to talk for a moment while you sort that out, Joey, and I'll start by saying, first off, thank you to the UXIF team who are helping do all the Zoom work behind the scenes. We've got a couple of people using my login. The UXIF ladies have taken over my login in order to run this, which is why I think you haven't got me on the camera at the moment, but I'm sure that will be sorted very shortly. So big thank you to UXIF for their support. That's Joey, Sally and Shaiso, and also to Sue for keeping me organised. As always, a lot of you will know Sue from dealing with queries, etc. And John also, who's running around behind the scenes and helping to keep Sue and I fed and watered, etc. and generally in order. I'm going to start by saying a couple of words on greenwash, because last night I flipped open a magazine and I got really bothered. I know I've just run you through my general views of the market, but I'm deeply concerned about where we're going with this whole greenwash thing. There is greenwash. There are people who are massively overstating what they're doing. But what I'm concerned about is the motivations of some of those people who are crying greenwash. I think it's really important to consider that some of the people who are now talking about greenwash really just 2-3 years ago were not remotely interested in this area. So it suits them very well to, rather than spending time understanding the many different strategies that are addressing the many different issues that we've got to deal with and the different thought processes that sit behind the funds, if they just say, oh, this is all greenwash. So be really careful. Now, I don't know if any of you are going to be able to see this or not, but 3 brass monkeys, you may be aware, just Google it at some point when you get the chance. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I think that's a really good analogy for where we are in sustainable investment at the moment, because there's a lot of people who don't want to hear this stuff. They want to think that we can carry on doing everything as we did before. They don't want to have to start asking their clients about issues they're really uncomfortable about. And they don't want the world to be getting messed up in the way that it currently is. So we've got to really steamroller through all of that and come out the other side saying, there are imperfections, but by and large, these are communications problems. And it's from managers, as I said a moment ago, not understanding the depth and the complexity of the issues, and therefore perhaps the best way to deal with it. Now, we don't want all these funds being the same. That will create whopping great bubbles. So that will help nobody if all funds suddenly look identical. So we need the diversity we see. But yes, so let me leave you with that thought. Just be aware of the motivations of those crying greenwash and really what we need to do in order to get them to help to understand the area better and to move them forwards and get through this phase that we're in at the moment, because get through it we will. We have no choice.
Okay.
With that
Julia?
rather serious message. Sorry, go ahead, Joey.
Yes, everyone can see you. When you want me to share any slides, let me know. I'm here.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. So I was about to say, without further ado, Joey, if you could pop on to our first and most serious of poll questions, which is just to make sure that everybody is familiar with how to use the poll and happy with the answers. So I'll give you a moment to read this, this question.